Nation. I'm Adrian. This is the Hegemony Explained series. In this video we're talking about two of the key psychological heuristics that make hegemony possible, in fact make it unavoidable, which is the availability heuristic and the illusory truth heuristic, illusory truth effect. Those two are really important because it's what we see most often in the news. So the availability heuristic, quickly, the things that are at the top of our minds is what we believe is the most important. Whatever we can think about readily, we think is the most important thing, because otherwise, why would we be thinking about it? And the illusory truth effect is that if you say something that's false, that's wrong, if you say it often enough, people will start to believe that it's true, because otherwise, why would you be saying it so much? And it has a lot of staying power. The illusory truth effect, there's a corollary known as the continued influence effect, which is that people will continue to believe this wrong information long after they received it. If they're never challenged to change their opinion, if they're never given a compelling reason to change their mind, they're going to continue to believe that this is wrong. It's why we have people on their deathbed dying of COVID who are still denying that COVID exists, wondering why doctors and nurses are wearing hazmat suits because they think it's a hoax. They think it's a hoax so strongly that they're dying of it and won't change their mind. So that's the illusory truth effect, continued influence effect. Let's take a look at how that plays into political hegemony. Key psychology of hegemony, as we talked about, we're going to go through a series, and today we're just focusing on the two that we see most often. So, as I've already mentioned, the illusory truth effect is that we tend to believe things are true if those things are repeated often enough. And we think about, rather, the things that we think the most important things happening. I should reword that, it's clunky. We think the most important things happening are whichever things we think about most often, which is the availability heuristic. Whatever's at the top of our mind is, in our minds, in our mind's eye, the most important thing to worry about, because it's at the top of our mind. It's important. It's important to us. And it's easy to understand why this is the case, right? We trust news sources to tell us the truth and tell us the truth about things that matter. So we trust that they are picking the most important stories to tell us. But the consequence is anything that's not talked about is considered not important. It becomes just as important, if not more so, the things that news stories leave out. Entire stories, sometimes it's entire stories, things that happen, sometimes it's specific details within the stories. But that's a very important piece of the puzzle. We trust these news sources to tell us not just the truth, but the truth about what's most important today, for us to know today, right now. But really, that's not what we're hearing. Most of what we hear is not important to us. It's only important to keep us in sort of this frame of mind. As we get back to these two psychological heuristics, there's pretty... We talked about in another video the war on drugs and the war on terror and how we depict certain ethnic groups in the news and in TV media and all over the place, how a certain group is shown to the public repeatedly over and over and over again. It starts to be how the public accepts the identity of that group. We start to believe that that's true, that that's the case for them, which is not the case. So an example of that was this study conducted that showed, based on it measured the way in which these different groups were talked about. So you can see in the small print there, the groups are African Americans, Asian Americans, Latinos, Jews, and Muslims. And the left set of blocks is for articles that mention them just about one or two times, and on the right, those blocks are for articles that mention these groups 3 or more times. So what you can see is that Muslims are represented horribly in the media with an extremely low score. The scoring system is here. So, and they're all going downwards, negative, except for Asian Americans. So you can see Muslims are represented in just extremely negative ways, strongly negative, says our color scheme here, in the media. And whether or not the things are true that we're saying about them, we start to believe it, and we start to adopt this negative idea about these ethnic groups for no reason other than we're told to. When we read it in the news, we read a news article that mentions it once, twice, 3 or more times, this group in a negative light, and we see those articles day after day, we're going to start to believe it's true. To no fault of our own. Why would you not think that it's true? You see it everywhere. What you would be crazy to just take a lone stand and say something else. Like, by definition, you would be crazy because all of the information is telling you to think a certain way. So it's no fault of our own that we fall victim to political hegemony. It relies on these unavoidable psychological heuristics, and that's the important thing. We can't fault people for believing the way that they believe. Very often, they didn't come up with that belief on their own. So we have to empathize, figure out how we all know what we know, and try to work towards something better. Because representation matters. The way we talk about people matters. So, be positive, my friends. That's the lesson today. Happy day of the week to you, Wealthy Nation. See you next time.